Someone said not long ago, "I'll bet there is an interesting story to go with each of your books." Here are a couple to go with Atlantis Rising, published by the Gulday Press. Although the book was first published by Dell Books in 1973, and as Frank Joseph, who wrote the foreword to the new edition, observed, it reignited public interest in Atlantis. And as William H. Kennedy notes, it was the very first work to suggest that ancient people were visited by extraterrestrials who helped shape an antediluvian global culture. The book was actually written in 1969 to 1970. An editor who had been advancing up the literary ladder, moving from smaller houses to larger ones, he called and assumed the editorship of Dell Books and said, "Let's do that big book on Atlantis that we've talked about." After Brad Steiger had completed the book, he learnt that Dell had exciting news. Walt Disney Studios wanted to option Atlantis Rising for a motion picture. He met with a number of executives at Disney in New York, and it seemed a sure thing that his book would be the basis for a film. Publication of Atlantis Rising would, however, be delayed in order to coincide more closely with the release of the film. The only tangible thing with which he was left from the Disney experience was a fistful of Mickey Mouse pens for his children. His Dell editor moved on to another publisher, and the years passed. Disney finally made Atlantis: The Lost Empire in 2001, which bombed at the box office, the studio's rightful karma. Another interesting story that occurred during the writing of this book was a strange telephone call he received while working late one night on the manuscript from someone who claimed to be an Atlantean and who was calling from one of their undersea bases. Yes, we know what you're thinking. Why should we be surprised if, as an author of the strange and unusual, receive a call from a nut who believed that he was living in a city over the ocean? Maybe, but he just happened to be working on Chapter 5, Mighty Teachers from an Undersea Kingdom, when he called. If Atlantis should still exist, Brad is convinced that the most likely place for its domain would be under our seas. In 1969, Dr. Roger W. Westcott, chairman of the anthropology department at Drew University, Madison, New Jersey, published The Divine Animal, in which he presented a well-reasoned theory that extraterrestrials had landed on Earth circa 10,000 years ago, intending to teach humankind a better way of life. The anthropologist feels that these space travelers were viewed as gods by our human ancestors, but when Earth's dominant species continued to demonstrate their avaricious and destructive nature, the extraterrestrials gave up in disgust and withdrew to establish undersea bases. Although the cosmic tutors were temporarily thwarted in their attempts to build a better world here on Earth, they did not give up hope, and they emerge from time to time to conduct certain spot checks to see if humans are advancing intellectually and becoming less barbaric. Such monitoring forays explain the sightings of UFOs which have been reported for thousands of years. Dr. Westcott also suggests that when the UFO nauts withdrew from the Earth's surface, they took some humans along with them to train them and tutor according to their advanced extraterrestrial principles. Dr. Westcott conjectures that some of these specially tutored humans might have been returned to the surface at certain intervals to have become leaders. Some of these apprentices worked to change humankind for good, while others, corrupted by the combination of their secret knowledge and the malleability of the less advanced surface humans, only brought additional chaos and confused the world. Dr. Westcott speculates that such individuals as Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, Genghis Khan, and Attila the Hun might have been sent up to the surface by the UFO nauts with varying degrees of success. In Dr. Westcott's view, such a theory helps to explain two of the most widespread and persistent legends found among nearly all species and cultures. 1. There was a time when gods walked the earth and tutored humankind. 2. There was a culture called Atlantis, whose thriving civilization met with catastrophe and sank beneath the sea. Dr. Westcott also theorizes that there may not have been a catastrophic destruction of a continent, but rather an orderly withdrawal of the gods, the cosmic teachers, as they transferred their bases from the land to the sea floor. If such a theory as the one he proposes may be true, Dr. Westcott suggests that the many reputable sea captains who have seen UFOs going in and out of the ocean might well be seeing aerial vehicles from undersea bases constructed by advanced beings. Ever since Brad, our author, began an intensive study of the UFO phenomenon in 1956, he's been intrigued by those reports from individuals who claim to have witnessed strange aerial craft entering and leaving large bodies of water. What is more, the mystique and the reality of undersea USO, unidentified submarine objects, bases, seems to grow more convincing with each passing year. In mid-February 1942, 5 years before Roswell, Lieutenant William Brennan of the Royal Australian Air Force was on patrol over the Bass Strait south of Melbourne, Australia, on the lookout for Japanese submarines or long-range German U-boats. Fishermen in the area had reported mysterious lights bobbing on the sea at night, and after the Japanese attack on Darwin on February the 19th, the Allied High Command was urging the strictest vigilance. The air patrol was flying a few miles east of the Tasman Peninsula about 5:50 p.m. on a sunny evening when a strange aircraft of a glistening bronze color suddenly emerged from a cloud bank near them. The object was about 150 feet long and approximately 50 feet in diameter. Lieutenant Brennan saw that the particular craft had a dome or cupola on its upper surface, and he thought that he might have seen someone inside wearing a helmet. The unidentified aerial craft flew parallel to the RAAF patrol for several minutes. Then it abruptly turned away and dived straight down into the Pacific. Lieutenant Brennan emphasized that the USO made a dive, not a crash, into the ocean, and he added that before the craft left them, he noticed what appeared to be 4 fin-like appendages on its underside. For many years, Brad has received regular reports of UFO harassment of shrimp boats. An early account that he received from Ira Pete, owner of the Ruby E, a 67-foot shrimp boat, who had had his vessel sink under mysterious circumstances in the first week of July 1961, was considerably more serious than the accounts of UFOs surfacing beside the shrimp boats or buzzing the crews. According to Pete, he was fishing in the Gulf of Mexico off Port Aransas with his 2-man crew when something hooked into the boat and ripped off its stern. Fortunately for the 3 shrimpers, there was another fishing vessel close by. On February the 5th, 1964, the 105-foot yacht Hattie D was rammed by an underwater something near Eureka, California. 10 men and 1 woman were lifted from the fast-sinking yacht in a dramatic Coast Guard helicopter rescue. The survivors all agreed that the Hattie D had been run into by something big made of steel. When crewman Carl Johnson was informed that no submarines were reported in the area and the yacht had sunk in 7,500 feet of water, he adamantly replied that he didn't care how deep it was in that area, and he knew that whatever holed the yacht had been a very long piece of steel. On January the 12th, 1965, Captain K, an airline pilot on a flight between Wenepai and Katia, New Zealand, spotted a USO when he was about 1/3 of the way across the Kaipara Harbour. As he veered his DC-3 for a closer look at what he had first guessed to be a stranded grey-white whale in an estuary, it became evident to him that he was now observing a metallic structure of some sort. Captain K saw that the object was perfectly streamlined and symmetrical in shape. He could detect no external control surfaces or protrusions, but there did appear to be a hatch on top. Harboured in no more than 30 feet of water, the USO was not shaped like any ordinary submarine. He estimated its length to be approximately 100 feet, with a diameter of 15 feet at its widest part. Later, the Navy stated that it would have been impossible for any known model of submarine to have been in that particular area due to the configuration of harbour and coastline. The surrounding mudflats and mangrove swamps would make the spot in which Captain K saw his USO inaccessible to conventional undersea craft. On July the 5th, 1965, Dr. Dmitry Rebikov, a marine scientist making preparations to explore the Gulf Stream's depths, found himself faced with a most unusual challenge when he detected and attempted to photograph a fast-moving undersea USO on the bottom of the warm water stream that flows from the Florida Keys to Newfoundland and onward to northern Europe. Dr. Rebikov told Captain L. Jacques Nicholas, project coordinator, that the object was pear-shaped and moving at approximately 3½ knots. The peculiar object was moving beneath various schools of fish, and at first, judging from its size, Dr. Rebikov thought it to be a large shark. As he monitored it, however, he noted that the USO's direction and speed were too constant. The marine scientist theorized that the object was mechanical and running on robot pilot, but since they were unable to receive any signal from the USO, he really had no idea what it might have been. In the summer of 1969, Englishman John Fairfax rowed his way across the Atlantic, docking in Fort Lauderdale after 6 harrowing months alone on the sea. When asked by journalists to name the most impressive thing that had happened to him during the ocean adventure, Fairfax replied rather reluctantly that the answer to that question would have to be the appearance of objects that could not have been anything other than flying saucers. Emphasizing that he had never believed in such things, he went on to explain that there was so much more involved in his experience than simply observing UFOs. There was a force, he told reporters. It was as if the objects kept asking him if he wanted to come with them. And I was fighting the force and saying back, no, 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 Fairfax said. It was like telepathy, like being hypnotized. Then these luminous saucers swooped down over the ocean, rose and swooped down again. In December 1997, a massive craft was seen emerging from the sea next to an oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico. According to engineer Jeremy Packer, the sighting was witnessed by 250 oil rig workers. At about 7:58 a.m., Packer said that everyone got frightened when they heard a rumbling noise that they knew couldn't be the engines that ran the platform bore. Looking towards the west, they sighted 25 to 30 helicopters on maneuvers. This was not unusual, Packer said, except that the rig commander said that he had not received the usual alert regarding Coast Guard maneuvers. Then, according to Packer, they all saw something that totally changed their lives. All of the helicopters stopped in midair, and a huge metal cigar-shaped object about the size of the oil platform surfaced beneath them. The massive craft, about as long as 2 football fields, soared straight out of the water and into the air, where it hovered above the helicopters for about 2 minutes. Packer described the object as concave on its underside with 4 large domes on its bottom. The top side of the cigar-shaped craft was enriched by beautiful lights of every color that one could imagine. And then, as if someone had turned off a light switch, the giant craft disappeared. 1 second everyone was studying the object through binoculars or telescopes, then, in the literal blink of an eye, it was gone. As an interesting side note, Packer said that the crew noticed that their watches were 30 minutes later than the actual time when they got back to the mainland. In 1990, on a dark night somewhere in the Andes, near the ancient site of the sacred Incan city of Ollantaytambo, Peru, Brad and his wife Sherry watched numerous illuminated UFOs emerge from the surface of a lake, soar into the night in a particular zigzag flight pattern, then descend once again beneath the water. Obviously quite accustomed to the sight, the Peruvian villagers went about their tasks of carrying grain and water to their families in jars atop their heads, paying little attention to the USO phenomenon. In answer to queries regarding the glowing objects, the villagers' answers were consistent. Angels, the old ones, the grandfathers, who have never left us.